Okay, so we're going to start this tutorial by in Photoshop here, and I'm going to create myself a new Photoshop image, and I'll make this 960 pixels by 300 high. It's RGB, 72 pixels per inch, and click OK. Right, so there we go. I'll just get the layers panel up over on the side here. So we've got layer 1, and what I'm going to do is create a hillside scene with the components of a windmill. The idea being that we'll then move that into Flash and we'll animate it in Flash to create a wind farm. So in order to create a hillside effect, first of all, what I'm going to do is just ensure that I've got the default black and white colours here in the toolbar, and then go up to filter and select render and clouds. That gives me a cloud effect like so. I'm going to apply a number of filters to this just to apply a more interesting effect. So let's go up to filter again, noise, and add noise. Add a bit of pixelation there. Let's click OK. And I'm going to go up to filter again and down to brush strokes and splatter, and I'll resize that so you can see it a bit better. But there's splatter, and I'll play around with the sliders on that until I'm happy with that. Click OK. Starting to come together, and then one last filter, and I'll go to blur and Gaussian blur, and OK. Alright, so reasonably happy with that. You could play around with those filters until you achieve the text that you were after. I'm going to go with that though, and then I'm going to add a adjustment layer. So down at the bottom of the layers panel, I'm going to add a hue and saturation. So click hue and saturation, and we've got the hue, saturation and lightness there. Now because we started off with black and white, I'll need to click on colorize, like so, and let's change the hue slider up to a suitable green, play with the saturation a bit, play around with the lightness, and there we go, that's looking okay. So I've got my first feature there, the green that's going to become the hills. Now, does it look like a hill? Fair enough. I'll pick up the lasso tool, and I'm going to create a hill type of curve. Let's make my way around the edge of the bottom there. So I've got that selected. Select my layer here. Let's call that hill. And then down at the bottom, I'll create a layer mask. So if we just click add layer mask, there we go, we've got our hills starting to come together. Now I want another set of hills, so I'll just take that existing layer, drag that down, place it on the new layer icon, and that will duplicate that. So now I've got two layers there, two sets of hills, hill copy. So with hill copy selected, we'll then go to edit, transform, and I'm going to flip that horizontally, so I'll get two sets of hills like so, just to add a little bit of perspective. Okay, right, now let's stick another layer in. We need a sky as well, so call this layer sky, and drag that down to the bottom of the stack like so, and I'll then going to pick suitable colours for a sky effect, so we'll have some blue, and we'll have some lighter blue, that'll do, like so. And then I'm going to go up to filter like we were before and render clouds, so use that light blue and dark blue this time. Or will it? Well, it seems to have used the green, but if you look over here it does look blue. and it appears green because of this adjustment layer. That's okay. So the adjustment layer has been applied to all of these, but the little trick is if you hold the Alt key down, you get this Venn diagram icon, and you can just click OK to associate that with this. And if I hold the Alt key down again on here, there you go. See, the other ones get applied. They're green there as well, and it also has the added benefit of changing the hills a little bit. Perhaps we'll just move those. Oops, wrong one. Let's pick the hill copy like so. Okay, actually if I Alt clicked on that, I could put that back in, and let's apply another saturation to this layer. So we could add a hue saturation in, colorize it, put our green in there, and that's good. Let's go back to layers and Alt click. There we go. So there you go. There's our hillside scene. Right. So I'll just save this before we go any further. So I'll save this as hillside. Right. So now I want to start the process of putting together a windmill. So what I'm going to do is just zoom in slightly here, and I'm going to bring some grids into play. So if your grids aren't on, if you go to View, Rulers, that'll switch to Rulers on, and under Show you've got Grid. I'm going to just use the rulers for this. So with rulers selected, I'll go up to the rulers and drag in a guide like so, and I'm going to position them like this. Let's space them out in 10 pixel intervals using the rulers. I want 5 of these. You'll see what it is I'm going to achieve here in a second. Like that. Right, so what I'll put the guides on for is I want to draw a shape that will become the windmill blade. So I just need some horizontally or vertically as well. Just drag these in. Less worried about the positioning of those. That'll do. Right, and I'm going to pick the pen tool up, which is over here. And I'll use the pen tool to draw around these dots, place dots on here to create a windmill blade type shape. So I'll stick a new layer in first of all. Let's put that at the top of the layer stack. And right, so in my new layer, and I'll click, 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 click around these points that I've created with the guide, and then close the path like so. Right, now if we got rid of those guides now, we could just drag these guides back off to the edge if you don't want them. Off they go. Goodbye, guides. Thank you for your help, much appreciated, but we don't want you now. So off they go, like so we can just see what we're doing. Right, great. Now, if I go over to the Paths panel, which hides behind layers, you see we have what's called a work path. And I'm going to toggle the colour back here to white before we do this. But on the Paths panel, if I then right click and do Make Selection, that will become, when I accept that, a series of marching ants trundling around there like so. So I finished in Paths now. It gives me an interesting shape I was after. I'll go back to Layers, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use the Gradient tool to create a black-white gradient, a linear gradient, like so, and use the crosshair just to drag down. That's got transparency. I don't want transparency, so I want that one. try that one. We don't want any transparency on this, so we'll just make sure we haven't got any, which we shouldn't have. There we go, so we get a little bit of shading there. Okay, so I'm quite happy with the way that that's going. I just want to squash that down a little bit, make it a little bit smaller. So Control T, Command T on a Mac gives me the transform handlers. Just squeeze that down a little bit, squash it in a bit, and you'll see that I've now got a kind of windmill blade type shape. Now if I just zoom in, so let's apply the transformation to that. If I zoom in, you'll see that what I want to do is rotate this now and create 3 of these. So if I hold the Alt key down, I'll be able to move that transformation point to the axis there like so. The reason why I've done that is because when I rotate that now, it'll rotate around that point. So there's my layer. This is the layer where the blade is living. I'm going to drag that down and, well, sorry, let's apply the transformation first of all, and I'll call this blade 1. Drag that down onto the new layer icon to duplicate it, so we've got blade copy. Let's do Command T. Let's use the Alt to put the transformation point at the axis, and then I'm going to rotate that 120 degrees, like so. Right, let's take blade again, we'll duplicate it a second time, so blade copy 2 this time, Command T, and let's make sure we're on the right one. Just drop that. So here's my blade copy 2, which should be in a second. And Alt key, bring him into the middle, and this time I rotate that by -120, like so. So you'll see that I've achieved a windmill type effect. Got these 3 layers now, let's select them all, holding the Shift key down, right click, merge layers, call them blades. Great, so toggle that on and off, we've got the blades of our windmill. Right, I just want to create the mast of the windmill now, and before we move across into Flash, so I'm going to pick the polygon tool, polygon shape tool. We'll set the number of size to 3, and I've got white and black, which is great, and I'll draw myself a triangle. Not much like the mast of a windmill, but not to worry, because Command T, our old friend, the transform, will allow me to squash that in and just shape that a little bit more interestingly than we had with the humble triangle. There we go. And I want to add a little more interesting shading there as well, so let's rasterize what we've got there. Right click and rasterize. So that's now a bitmap layer. I'll pick the gradient tool. Sorry, let's use the magic wand to select those pixels. We'll pick the gradient tool, drag across to give it a little bit of a shade. Let's try another go. There we go. Right, so let's drop that. Command D, we've got our mast, we've got our windmill shape, and just before we move across into Flash, what I want to do is just rename that layer as mast. Make sure all my layers are sensibly named, which they seem to be, so we can now save our PSD file, and we're ready now to move across into Flash. Right, so let's show you Flash. we'll hop across into Flash. I'll just have to resize it. Right, there we go. So here's Flash, and I'm going to do File, New. I could just pick New from the middle here, so let's do that, that's easier. ActionScript 3, and I'll then do File, Import, Import to Stage. Let's find our PSD file, there it is. Now, when you select a PSD file, the nice thing about Flash and Photoshop is they'll have a little chat and they'll recognise all the individual components that I've created in Photoshop. So there's masked. I can bring that as a bitmap. Notice that's picked up all the names, so name your layers. But I want to bring that in as a movie clip. Same with blades. The rest of these will leave as bitmaps, that's fine. But the one other thing that's neat about this dialog box is if I tick this, set stage size, same size as Photoshop canvas, knows the sizing, that's great, it means I don't have to mess around resizing in Flash, so I can click OK and in it all goes. So there we go, we've got all our assets straight in from Photoshop, listed there in the library. Now, we'll be able to tweak stuff here in a second. Let's bring the timeline up in Flash. There's masked, there's blades, as lovely created in Photoshop. So I'm going to select those two objects and then go to Modify, Convert to Symbol. Because what I want is a windmill. So I'll call this windmill, I'll create it as a movie clip symbol and then click OK. There's all the bits and pieces in the library, let's open them up. So double clicking on the blue icon there will take me into the symbol edit mode. There we are inside of symbol edit mode. I've got the blades and the mast, and I'm going to go to Modify, Timeline, Distribute to Layers, and that will place mast and blades on their own individual layers, which is good because this is the only one. Let's select them individually. That's the only one I want to animate. I'll drop that centrally onto the top of the windmill like so. Now just before I tweak that, I'll get the transformation tool and make sure the transformation point sits central like so. You'll see it will then rotate around that point. Right, so let's pick up our black selection tool, pick up the windmill blades, and then right click and create motion tween. Flash will put 1 second's worth, 24 frames worth in there. F5 will ensure that the mast stays in view there as well. I'll click on the tween, go to properties, let's set it to rotate once. You can test that now. There it is going round. Bit of pixelation on the blades, that's not a problem. I can just go to the blades in the library, let's take those into isolation mode, and let's go into assets. There's the blades actually inside of the assets, let's go into there, and we could do modify, break apart. That bit now becomes editable. Bit of a razor just to tidy stuff up there. A little bit more care in Photoshop and that wouldn't have been an issue. Right, so back to our windmill. Should still be doing its stuff. There it is, fantastic. Right, back to our scene on the breadcrumb. We've got the one windmill there. Let's position him over here. But we can have as many of these as we like. I'll rename that layer windmills. The blade layer is redundant. I can go in the bin. Let's drag another windmill in. Maybe scale that one a bit differently. A bit further distance. That's another. He could perhaps be in the foreground. And if we test that in the Flash player, there you go. Photoshop to Flash. no time at all. Fantastic Adobe integration.